Welcome to Scriptural Science, a presentation of Truth and Life Institute, Boston, Massachusetts, and Oba, Nigeria. The following is a subsection of the book. Ask what you can do for the kingdom of God and not just what God can do for you. Written and published by Ifeanyi Chukwujima, scriptural scientist and a servant of God. This subsection's ID is Ask What You Can Do 2:8. What is morality? What is morality? Does the world know morality better than God? And who in the world sets the standard for morality? From where do they draw their knowledge for setting morality code for the world? Do they go around and ensure that people who breach their morality code are held responsible for their breaches? Do they even have the ability to police the whole world for conformance to morality? Are they going to be around throughout all generations of mankind to ensure consistency in the world's observance of their morality code? Does their morality code come with assurances and guarantees as God's commands come with? Or should these so-called morality experts get out of the way and allow the world to go back to God and obey the life-giving commands of God, which is the only morality that is grounded in truth? Aren't the masses suffering enough already? How much more do they have to bear in the hands of the strong men of the world, whose wisdom the world has to follow? Government is utterly critical in the lives of human beings. That is why the devil went after it at the Garden of Eden and stole it from Adam and Eve. The devil has controlled government since. And just before Jesus Christ was arrested and crucified by the Roman authorities, the devil ceded his power and authority to politics, creating the impression of reformed world leadership. Politics is the prince of this world, John 14 verse 30, and John 12 verse 31, and Revelation 13 verses 1 to 2. It is a new era and a new commander-in-chief under a new guise, but the ruler is still the same, the devil. This is why even democratic governments around the world continue to remove everything God from within them. But God must be in government for government to work. Any government that shuns God is headed to total disaster, whether the leaders believe that or not. A government who takes a position in anything that is counter to the commands of God, which are in the Bible, is drifting towards a disastrous end. Everybody touts democracy as the best way for every society to be governed. At the same time, people in democracies are walking away from God and the Bible in large numbers, believing that the only thing that matters is that they implement whatever the majority wants. Democracy only works when democracies follow the commands of He who has the real majority in all creations, large and small. God is the majority in everything. Human science has ascertained that everything science has been able to detect and characterize in the entire universe constitutes only 4% of the universe. The undetectable universe, 96% of the universe, is God's free spirit, which human science has termed dark energy, 73%, and spiritual beings, which human science has termed dark matter, 23%. Even the 4% visible universe is fully saturated with God's free spirit, in the same percentage His free spirit exists in the open universe, 73%. God is, therefore, 73% of the 4% visible universe, making God the true majority throughout the universe. God is, therefore, the only being of significance on the whole earth. He is the true majority in every society across the world. God is the majority in USA, the majority in the United Kingdom, the majority in Russia, the majority in South Africa, the majority in Bangladesh, the majority in Nigeria, the majority in the Vatican City, the smallest country in the world. Therefore, as far as majority goes, God always has the lion's share everywhere in the world. There is no political group anywhere in any society of the world that can rally a larger majority to top God, even in His singularity. It goes without saying, then, that anyone who claims to be democratic and yet pushes God's majority aside so that they can pursue their own agenda is infringing on the rights of God, who is in the majority in every society of the world. Therefore, anyone who overrides God's majority in a democracy brings God's wrath on themselves. The Bible says, For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. Romans 1 verse 20. Listen to the warning of Bernie Sanders, an American politician who is running for the presidency of his country, about democracy that is untethered from morality. Here is an internet excerpt about his interview, as reported by a third party. I am motivated by a vision which exists in all of the great religions, in Christianity, in Judaism, in Islam, Buddhism, and other religions, and which is so beautifully and clearly stated in Matthew 7 verse 12, Sanders said. And it states, "So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets." In the interview with The Post, Sanders sought to explain how his approach to political issues, from climate change to income inequality, is grounded in a moral understanding that transcends religious and political partisanship. Sanders has also used his family history to draw what he says are important lessons about the dangers of democracy when it is untethered from morality. He recalled during a recent breakfast with reporters how a trip he and his brother took to their father's ancestral village in Poland reminded him of what happened when elections precipitated the rise of the Nazis, leading to the death of 6 million Jews, including 3 members of Sanders' family. What I learned as a little kid, Sanders said, is that politics is, in fact, very important. http://amosstrib.com/news/Sanders-answers-God question, http question. Many people have been indoctrinated into believing that there are no proofs that God even exists because they have stopped thinking for themselves. The Bible proclaims that God makes himself invisible to put his eternal power and divine nature on display for the whole world to see, and so know him, Romans 1 verse 20. And that God's eternal power and God's divine nature have been in display from the beginning of time. Therefore, anyone who allows another to convince them that God does not exist is following the misdirection of their own mind, or not using their mind at all. Open your eyes and all your other senses and behold God. He is everywhere and in everything. God has given to each and every one of us a mind and a spirit. For those of us whose minds are not that developed to reason for ourselves, God gave to them spirits that are heightened to help keep them from walking into evil. The world's emphasis on the education of the mind has stripped many in the world of the ability to feel their spirit. Most people in the world no longer recognize that they have a spirit which is superior to their mind. Therefore, they block out their spirits and become constantly victimized by the fluctuations of their own minds. There is God in everything in the form of grace, and grace is real and substantive. God is the only reason why anything exists and works. Anyone who wants to have fulfillment in whatever they do in life must acknowledge God in the things they do. Anything that works anywhere is, in real time, operated, maintained, and controlled by God. That is why Jesus Christ said, "My Father always at his work to this very day, and I too am working," John 5 verse 17. A politician's business is politics. Yet politicians speak about spirituality and morality in the process of conducting their business. Conscientious politicians recognize that unless a government is grounded in good morality, the government would become a hostage to special interests. Special interests constantly override the will of the people and take the whole society in a direction the society may never recover from. Politicians do not identify special interests as the devil, doing what the devil does best. But special interest serves the will of the devil by taking resources and government interest away from the people. But God, who is always the majority in every society of the world, continues to serve the will of the people where people have not sold out to special interests. The Bible declares, "In their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps," Proverbs 16 verse 9. In our respective minds, we decide so many things, good or bad, kind or wicked, straight or devious, helpful or hurtful, just or unjust. But the ultimate outcome of all our plans and all human maneuvers are determined by God. and not by the people that cook up these plans to serve their own selfish interests. A plan may appear to be doing what it was devised for, when it is actually leading to something totally different from what the planner had in mind. Anyone who is doubtful of the preceding passage from Proverbs should be reminded of the golden calf, which the Israelites made for themselves as God, to replace the living God. Under pressure, Aaron collected their gold and dumped all of it into the fire. With minimal craftsmanship, the result was a sculptured golden calf. Aaron never intended to make a golden calf, nor were the agitating Israelites seeking to make a golden calf. The only thing the disobedient Israelites cared about was to create something they can worship, other than what they had with God and Moses. They wanted to be like the Egyptians and all the other nations around them. They intimidated Aaron into going along with their plan, Exodus 32, verse 22. They plotted to get rid of Moses and ditch God, Exodus 32, verse 1. They readily stripped their wives and children of their precious possessions, gold, to make sure they got the idol they wanted, Exodus 32, verse 2. They were bent on gaining their freedom from Moses and God so they could live life on their own terms. Then they said, "These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt," Exodus 32, verse 4. They succeeded in all their plans and were relishing their heart's desire when Moses finally returned, Exodus 32, verse 19. Here is Aaron explaining to Moses how the golden calf came to be. They said to me, "Make us gods who will go before us." As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him. 24. So I told them, "Whoever has any gold jewelry, take it off." Then they gave me the gold, and I threw it into the fire, and out came this calf. Exodus 32, verses 23 to 24. The only thing the Israelites were interested in at that moment was a man-made God. They did not have a design in mind or a blueprint for the design of the God they wanted. They just so badly wanted a God, and they readily paid for it. God decided that the God, which his disobedient children sought so desperately, would be a calf. The Israelites were so reckless at that moment that if the gold which Aaron dumped into the fire came out as a shapeless blob, they would still gladly worship that blob as their God. So God gave them a calf. That way, they would not descend lower in their idiocy than the idol-worshipping nations around them, who decide on what image to design and worship. The Israelites were acting in revolt against God, but it was God who ultimately decided what image they received in their rebellious enterprise, not them. And once they received that which they did not specifically ask for, they started celebrating like people without knowledge, because anybody with knowledge knows that intelligent design does not come without planning. An orange tree produces oranges, not apples. Apple trees do not produce strawberries. Anytime you receive something unexpected from an unlikely source, you must stop and think, something is going on. And if you love your life, you must find out what is going on before continuing with life. Otherwise, you may be in for a big surprise. Being able to do anything you set out to do that is counter to God is not the end of the matter. It is only the beginning of it. The Bible declares, "There is no wisdom, no insight, no plan that can succeed against the Lord." Proverbs 21, verse 30. Anybody or any system that champions any agenda that is counter to God's commands in the Bible is in for a big surprise. The Lord allows human beings to test their powers and flex their muscles as much as they want. When He decides that He has had enough, in a twinkle of an eye, the success which people thought they had completely turns into despair. The whole world and the entire universe still belong to God, and God remains firmly in control of all things and all activities everywhere. His purpose will always prevail, no matter what anybody thinks or believes. Hear it from the Bible. Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. Proverbs 19, verse 21. It is not what any human person says that something is that matters. It is what God says that anything is that really matters. The world has coined its own versions of all the virtues in the Bible to suit its own agenda in opposition to God. But the Bible reminds us, bear in mind that our Lord's patience means salvation, just as our dear brother Paul also wrote you with the wisdom that God gave him. 16, he writes the same way in all his letters, speaking in them of these matters. His letters contain some things that are hard to understand, which ignorant and unstable people distort, as they do the other scriptures, to their own destruction. 2 Peter 3 verses 15 to 16. What, therefore, is morality? Does the world know morality better than God? Does the world's morality keep a family together better than God's morality? Whose morality must we subscribe to in order to be able to live a fulfilling life with assurances and guarantees? Has any world system been able to guarantee anyone's safety and security and deliver? Marriage is the key to morality. How to make marriage work is not a business a government has any authority in. No one and no worldly institution has any authority when it comes to marriage. Only God has authority over marriage. If it is called marriage anywhere in the world, God is squarely at the center of it. It does not matter who is getting married. It does not matter what religion the people who are getting married belong to. It also does not matter that they do not have a religion. As long as a man and a woman anywhere in the world comes together to live together, have children and share a common life, they are becoming married, and God gets the invitation automatically, not only to approve and bless the union, but also to become an indispensable part of that union. Mankind does not get it. Only God does marriage. And he never leaves marriage to any human beings or human institutions to decide. Marriage is God's through and through, because he is the one who joins two separate flesh and two separate spirits together to become one in marriage. And he is the all-essential third party in every marriage. And he is the glue that holds all marriages together. Marriage is not a religious thing, nor is marriage a civic thing. Marriage is the first church of God on the planet Earth. Churches everywhere consists of these little churches, marriages, that routinely come together to worship God together. When you get involved in a marriage, you are joined by God to the person you are married to, and everything that God requires from married people now applies to the two of you. There is no escape from it. It is automatic. The way no human being invites God to come into them and reside inside them so they can have life and live is the same exact way any man and woman who decide to merge their lives together to become one do not have to invite God to come and unite them as one. God automatically shows up, approving or disapproving, because marriage is God's thing. God is not only a witness to every marriage on the earth. God unites any one man and any one woman in marriage, in every language and culture, and remains in them, between them, and all around them for as long as they are loyal to their marriage. As the husband has a real and substantive existence, and his wife has a real and substantive existence, their marriage also has a real and substantive existence. The husband may change his mind and become disloyal to his wife and their marriage, and the wife may change her mind and become disloyal to her husband and their marriage, but their marriage always remains loyal to each of them because their marriage is anchored to God, the same exact way the church is anchored to God. Marriage is the key to morality. That is why God promptly created marriage to unite the human family and keep the human family from faltering. As a matter of fact, God created the woman so that he could create marriage. It is marriage, not the woman, that prompted God to proclaim in Genesis 2 verse 18, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him," Genesis 2 verse 18. The woman is a consequence of God's conception of marriage. She is God's precious gift, which God gives to the man through marriage. In other words, God conceived the church the moment God conceived marriage. Marriage is the first church on the earth and will forever remain the foundation of the church. The surpassing importance of marriage is also showcased for mankind to see in the coming of God's only begotten Son into the world. Jesus Christ came into the world, into the marriage of Joseph and the Virgin Mary. In essence, Jesus Christ came into the Word via the church, marriage, which God had instituted at the Garden of Eden upon the creation of the woman, Genesis 2 verses 18 to 24. First, God decided that there was going to be marriage in Genesis 2 verse 18. Later in Genesis 2 verse 20, God declared that a suitable spouse for the man has not yet been found, thus unequivocally telling the world that God conceived marriage before God conceived the woman for the marriage with the man. That is God's scientific precision at its best. God saying something that sounds like nothing, when in actuality, He is revealing a deep and profound mystery to mankind. A helper suitable for him, Genesis 2 verse 18, makes it appear that God conceived both the woman and the marriage simultaneously, with a helper referring to the woman and the woman's role in marriage. Closer examination of Genesis 2 verse 20, but for Adam no suitable helper was found, clearly indicates that the woman and marriage were conceived separately, as they were created separately. Marriage was conceived by God before Genesis 2 verse 18, and the woman was conceived by God right after Genesis 2 verse 20. God's comment, "It is not good for the man to be alone," Genesis 2 verse 18, announces to mankind that God had plans to give companionship to the man. And suitable for him tells us the nature of that companionship, which God confirmed as marriage in Genesis 2 to 24. God's declaration that the man he had created, Adam, was lonely and in need of a companion, Genesis 2 verse 18, is a revelation to mankind that by that very instant, marriage had already been conceived by God, and the search for the right companion had begun. The infinitely resourceful God is never out of anything. He was simply establishing something for mankind to grasp by loudly proclaiming, but for Adam no suitable helper was found, Genesis 2 verse 20. And upon that declaration, God went to work and created Eve, Genesis 2 verse 20. Then, God promptly took Eve to Adam and united them in marriage. God does not search for anything as if someone has to provide it to him, but for Adam no suitable helper was found, Genesis 2 verse 20, was simply God communicating a highly important truth to mankind, God's separate conceptions of marriage, and the woman for the marriage. Since the Bible has declared that the woman is a gift to the man, marriage, therefore, is the occasion for that gift, a helper suitable for him. God did not create the Bible to remind himself of what he did. God is infinite intelligence in himself. God created the Bible to show human beings what God did, the order in which God did it, where he felt that it was important for us to know, and what his actions and activities were designed to teach us. God is not into empty talks. He never utters a word unless the word means something profound. And any word, which comes out of the mouth of our holy God, never returns to God without achieving what God had uttered the word for. His purpose always stands. The Bible declaring that a suitable helper for Adam was not found was no slip of tongue. The declaration was also not recorded in the Bible to denote that God was at any time confounded as to what to do and how to do it. God was simply setting the record straight for mankind. That declaration was designed by God to communicate to mankind not only the sequence of events in the creation of the human family, but also the seriousness of marriage and marriage's intended purpose for all human lives and human salvation through the end of time. The suitability of the woman for the man was all the rage for God. The matchup must be perfect to produce the perfect marriage which God had planned for mankind's flawless life on the planet Earth. Marriage was intended by God to offer mankind a clear direction in life for our peace and our salvation. Marriage, therefore, was not conceived by God simply to give Adam just about any companion. And God did not give a companion to Adam for companionship's sake either. God created marriage for mankind's perfect morality, which will guarantee peace on earth and goodwill towards all human beings, and ultimately usher mankind to its eternal salvation and life with God and his Christ. In marriage, as in all the other human relationships, there is a clear and distinct pathway to achieving success, good morality, afforded by the perfect humanity which Jesus Christ regained for us from the sinful nature. There is authority, and there are subjects to authority. Then there is love, to blunt the sharp edges of authority. There is also mercy, to forgive and tame freedom and make freedom surrender to authority. Love, through mercy, helps the subjects under authority to keep their eyes on Jesus Christ and the objective which marriage was intended by God to achieve, morality. Your government, M. Otherwise, people can plan, but the event will never materialize. Your government issued license is an acknowledgement by your government that it knows about what you are doing. Your government may refuse to certify a marriage that violates its guidelines, but government does not approve marriage. Only God approves marriage. That God permits something to take place in the name of marriage does not mean that God approves it as marriage. When God approves, He blesses. God allows sins to happen even though He detests sin, because He had sworn to Himself to give every human being freedom to exercise their free will. Therefore, God allows things that are not marriage to take place in whatever way people regard it, because God has given a choice to every human being to either obey God's commands and live in God's righteousness, or to reject God's commands, do as they choose, and live with whatever consequences that result from their actions. This is why the Bible says that everything is permissible, but not all are constructive or beneficial. 1 Corinthians 10 verse 23. Love calls for God to give everyone the freedom to choose. But since freedom challenges authority, love also demands accountability. God has given every human being the freedom to choose for themselves, but requires that all account to Him for all their actions. If you believe that truth matters, you believe that God matters because your society's value systems cannot substitute for the truth. Only the knowledge of God teaches anyone the truth. Otherwise, you may be passionately pursuing a fantasy in the name of truth.